the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here with the Governor and everybody here today for this important announcement. We're really excited, and I want to thank everybody for being able to come out and attend today. We know that everybody's busy and a lot of summer schedules, but it's great to have everybody here. I wanted to reach out and certainly thank the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services and the Director, Uma Ulala. I practiced all night long too, so I apologize there. But I do want to reach out and recognize a couple of familiar faces that are out there in the crowd. Unfortunately, I won't be able to mention everybody, but I certainly want to target a couple people. County Executive Alan Kohlman has been a great partner, and I would definitely want to thank you for coming out today, so thank you very much for all the work that you're doing in stopping violent crime across the state, so thank you very much. I didn't see Senator Lee, but now I do see Senator Lee. right in front of me, so thank you very much, Senator, for all the advocacy work that you're doing in the community and bringing us together. I can't thank you enough, so thank you. And I also wanted to call attention to the University of Maryland, the University of Maryland system as a whole. Dr. Mary Ann Rankin, the provost at University of Maryland College Park, has been a great supporter of all the work that we've been doing, so thank you very much. And certainly the law enforcement community as a whole. As you look around the room, you see a lot of our partners in the law enforcement community here. They're the front lines of the work on all the violent crime that's occurring in the state, and we certainly want to appreciate them, so thank you very much for all of you that are here. And finally, I certainly want to recognize all the advocates that are here. Those that are also on the front lines working with the victims in the community, making sure that they're safe, making sure that they have they're self-sufficient and that they have access to information is very key, so thank you so much for being here as well. So now it's certainly my privilege to introduce Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. Since taking office in 2015, Governor Hogan is focused on creating new jobs and making Maryland a better place to live, work, and raise a family. His first years in office was the most successful in total job creation and private sector job growth in the last 15 years. Governor Hogan has also made investments in education, transportation, and landmark environmental initiatives and criminal justice reforms. He serves as the chairman of the Chesapeake Executive Council and was recently elected as the vice chair of the National Governors Association. So it's my honor to welcome Governor Larry Hogan.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all very much for joining us. Joining me up here today are my very good friend, Montgomery County Executive Ike Leggett. I just want to particularly single out Ike to say that we've been able to accomplish a heck of a lot together over the past 4 years in a really bipartisan fashion. And I just want to thank you for your leadership and for your cooperation working together with us. Also, I have here with me former Deputy U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Susan Esserman. Susan is the founder and director of the University of Maryland SAFE, which stands for Support, Advocacy, Freedom, and Empowerment, the SAFE Center for Human Trafficking Survivors. We also have Montgomery County Police Assistant Chief Marcus Jones. Marcus. And you already heard from Glenn Fuston, who is the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. He deserves it. Even though he bungled Uma's name, he's still a good guy. And we have Secretary of the Maryland Department of Human Services, Lourdes Padilla. And our Secretary of State, John Wobensmith. I'm also really pleased to see that my good friend, my other good friend, County Executive Alan Kittleman, thank you for joining us as well, Alan. He's been working on many of these issues together with us. We're here this morning to make some important announcements about a serious issue that people sometimes are reluctant to address. For 4 years, we have been working hard to pursue and combat the criminal gang enterprises that are terrorizing our communities, whether it's here in Montgomery County, in Baltimore City, or anywhere else across the state. We've been focused on giving law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and judges the tools that they need to try to help root out these criminal gangs. We pushed for and passed a Maryland RICO statute, which allows prosecutors to reach across county lines to pursue violent criminals in other jurisdictions, which can assist them in taking down entire criminal gang enterprises. We launched the Maryland Criminal Intelligence Network to connect strategic counties and cities with 36 federal, state, and local law enforcement task forces. This crime-fighting network is focused on comprehensive data sharing and collaboration to break down jurisdictional barriers. County lines don't deter criminals, don't even slow them down. And now they're no longer roadblocks to the brave men and women who are trying to stop them. Violent repeat offenders are responsible for so many horrific crimes in our state, including the use of firearms, homicides, drug trafficking, and other gang-related crimes. One of their heinous crimes is human trafficking. We have all seen the disturbing headlines. 2 men were arrested in Laurel for prostituting 3 teenage girls aged 15, 16, and 17 out of a local hotel. A Baltimore City man was indicted for grooming victims as young as 15 on social media and trafficking them into prostitution. His prostitution ring involved a total of 25 girls and women, most of whom were between the ages of 15 and 18 years old. Here in Montgomery County, 5 arrests were recently made in a human trafficking and prostitution operation involving 4 local massage parlors. The chilling reality is that Maryland's central location and access to major highways, airports like I-95 and BWI make our state a hotbed for human trafficking, including both sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Maryland is one of the top states in the nation in calls to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which serves victims and survivors of human trafficking. Earlier this year, I signed an executive order requiring every single state department and agency to prominently display information on the home pages of their websites regarding the National Human Trafficking Hotline and the Be Free text line, which allows victims and survivors to send a text message to ask for help or to help find local services. The latest data collected by the Victim Services Committee of the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force specifically identified 396 survivors of human trafficking in Maryland, 124 of whom were trafficked as underage girls and boys. These vulnerable young victims are being coerced and threatened, they're exploited and enslaved, and then they're often repeatedly sexually assaulted and raped. As a father, I'm heartbroken for these daughters and sons who are being victimized and brutalized. As governor, I'm committed to ensuring that not only are these violent perpetrators brought to justice, but that we also provide the resources necessary to help these survivors recover their lives. Human trafficking is among the most despicable crimes occurring in our state. And make no mistake about it, this is a violent crime. In this year's legislative session, we introduced a bill that would classify felony human trafficking, the worst of these cases, as a violent crime. And the Senate voted unanimously to pass this legislation. Unfortunately and inexplicably, the House failed to pass this common sense proposal. Montgomery County Senator Susan Lee who has joined us this morning, has introduced similar legislation and did so again this year. But the legislature also failed to pass her bill in the House. I want to thank Senator Lee for her leadership on this issue. And I look forward to working with you, Senator, and continuing to work across the aisle together with you and your colleagues to get this legislation passed. So today I'm announcing that on the very first day of the next legislative session in January, we will introduce the Felony Human Trafficking Act of 2019. Under our proposal, cases of human trafficking in which the perpetrator traffics a child or takes or detains a victim with the intent to use force to compel the victim to perform a sexual act will be classified as violent crimes. This legislation will ensure that offenders who commit these heinous acts will receive tougher penalties and will serve more of their sentences behind bars. Today, I am also executing an executive order which establishes a statewide anti-human trafficking director position to coordinate supportive services for victims as well as enforcement responses to traffickers. This anti-human trafficking director will collaborate with all state agencies, local governments, and departments of social services, as well as with our federal partners and service providers, child advocacy centers, nonprofit entities, and law enforcement agencies to develop policy recommendations, coordinated operational plans, and statewide best practices in order to combat human trafficking in Maryland. We must provide a comprehensive, coordinated response to human trafficking so that no matter where in the system a victim is encountered, we provide them with the supportive services and treatment that they need. Our new anti-human trafficking director will coordinate all of this important work, and we're going to execute that executive order right now with the Secretary of State. Sir. I have directed the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention to dedicate $5 million of its victims' funding specifically to the victims of human trafficking for support services including housing, assistance, job training, economic empowerment, and GED and vocational training, as well as for legal advocacy, a 24-hour talk line, emergency shelters, therapy and peer groups, and assistance to obtain a driver's license or ID. I'm pleased today to announce that the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention has issued a $500,000 grant to the University of Maryland College Park for the creation of the Maryland Crime Research and Innovation Center, which will serve as a hub for criminal justice research within the School of Public Policy. I want to thank University of Maryland President Dr. Wallace Lowe for his partnership on this initiative. This innovative knowledge center will focus on developing law enforcement solutions, victim services, prevention efforts, and other criminal justice programs. The Maryland Crime Research and Innovation Center will be dedicated to addressing all violent crime, but a significant focus will be placed on human trafficking, firearms trafficking, and drug trafficking, as well as gangs. As a part of the Maryland Criminal Intelligence Network, I am announcing more than $4 million in new grants for 13 jurisdictions to target gangs and violent criminal networks, including $260,000 in additional grants for Montgomery County. In addition, the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention has initiated a pilot program with the U.S. Attorney's Office, Baltimore City Police, and Prince George's County Police that will give us access to and allow us to analyze 2 years of case data, including information from approximately 2,000 cases. This intelligence sharing will help our state and our law enforcement officials to develop timely, accurate, and actionable intelligence to help take down human trafficking networks in order to produce more arrests, more convictions, and more incarcerations of these violent criminals. Finally, I want to be very clear that while it is critical for us to aggressively pursue human traffickers, we must never, ever forget the victims. This type of crime shatters a person's sense of security. Much too often, it leaves wounds that may not be seen, but which sometimes never truly or fully heal. In Maryland, we have worked hard to create a system of justice which restores victims and strengthens communities. A system that empowers victims, gives them the resources they need to become a safe, self-sufficient, better informed, and works to help break the cycle of criminal victimization, especially among the most vulnerable among us, our children. I'm announcing today that the Child Advocacy Center Best Practices Work Group is developing a protocol to identify and provide services to human trafficking victims, which will be used by child advocacy centers across the state. We will provide more and wider ranging victim services for these children with a trauma-informed approach, which focuses on their physical, psychological, and emotional safety in order to rebuild a sense of control and empowerment. One of our most important responsibilities is to protect our citizens, and human trafficking strikes at the very fiber of our Maryland communities, our families, and our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Hogan. Thank you for your support in this this very important issue and bringing it all together here with all of our partners. At this point, I want to take the opportunity to introduce County Executive Leggett and echo the governor's statements on how great it has been to collaborate with County Executive's office and the county as a whole. Our office has partnered with them on several different projects specific to human trafficking, victim services, violent repeat offenders, and prevention as a whole. And I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you and turn it over to Mr. Leggett.
Thank you, Governor, for the resources and the efforts statewide to help in this very difficult challenge that we face. But in addition to the resources that you provided, I also want to thank you for the leadership, because without that leadership, all of these things cannot in effect be done. So let's give the governor a round of applause. Let me also acknowledge Councilmember Sid Katz, whose district we were in. Sid was the former mayor of Gaithersburg, but I understand we're in Rockville today, right?
We love all here.
And we also have representatives from Mark Eldridge's office, as well as Senator Van Hollen. Thank you very much for being here as well. As the governor indicated today, this is an important issue. But I want you to think about this, that in the state of Maryland, which is one of the better educated communities in all of the United States, probably one of the more affluent, we have a problem that people oftentimes do not identify with a state such as Maryland, and certainly a jurisdiction such as Montgomery County. This is a national problem. Maryland is no exception. Montgomery County is no exception. And this is why the leadership from the governor's office and throughout the entire state is so important. And thank all of you for being here. Human trafficking is a form of modern day slavery. Human trafficking engaged in fraud as well as physical abuse, psychological and other types of coercion. And victims of human trafficking are some of the most vulnerable people in our society. That makes this task even more difficult. For years, Montgomery County has been at the forefront of trying to combat this particular problem. Last year, I signed legislation to transform the county's human trafficking task force that I had earlier established into a formal ongoing committee, because we realized that this was not something that you do once and you leave it alone, but you have to do it ongoing, and you have to continue to do that over the period of time. The committee structure ensures continuity of the work of the task force, and it will promote our ability to reduce human trafficking and to prevent it in Montgomery County and throughout the area. Our Montgomery County Committee works in concert with the Governor's Office in trying to prevent human trafficking. I especially again want to thank Senator Lee, Delegate Dumas, and Morales for their leadership as well. Locally, Montgomery County Human Trafficking Prevention Committee is working on 3 initiatives. First, the committee is surveying hotels and motels. Why are we doing this? That is to learn a little bit more about how they train and educate employees about human trafficking. Because much of the activities that we talk about are established and ongoing in legitimate hotels and motels. And therefore, those people need to be able to understand what is happening and need to be trained to recognize it. Results of the survey will be used so that we can determine what additional laws and measures we need to take. Secondly, the committee is enhancing victim services along with the state. You heard the litany of things that the governor is doing at the state level. There are some additional things we need to do here as well. Thirdly, the committee is reviewing and strengthening current body works. I like that term, body works. Well, body works are not always legitimate body works. They're akin to what we see in some of the massage regulations and laws that we've had to establish to address serious concerns. And you heard the governor also indicate the number of arrests that we've made locally. So police, the county's office of county attorney has also looked at a number of issues and made a number of arrests over the last few weeks. This is an important issue. It is important that we are addressing it on several fronts, through our police, through our executive branch, our legislative branch, our ongoing formal committee, to help to bring to fruition some of the things that we needed in order to combat this real difficult problem. Again, let me thank the governor and all of you for coming out today to help us to address this very serious problem right here in Montgomery County, right here in the state of Maryland. This is why we need to continue this effort, and why, again, I want to thank the governor for his tremendous leadership in helping us to combat this very serious problem. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive Leggett, for your leadership as well in moving things forward and your collaboration with our office and the administration as a whole. At this time, I want to take the opportunity to introduce another leader in this area, and that's Ambassador Esserman. She's been a great friend, confidant, someone that we can turn to ask questions of on a regular basis. She's taken a leadership role, obviously, in the Safe Center that the governor mentioned, but also as a partner at the Steptoe & Johnson international law firm, where she's done a lot of work, pro bono work, I should say, on the behalf of survivors of human trafficking. So her leadership extends there as well. Again, she's been very helpful and instrumental in some of the work that we're planning and some of the announcements that the governor has made. So I just want to welcome Susan Esserman.
Thank you, Glenn. Governor Hogan, thank you for shining a light on the scourge of human trafficking right here in our Maryland communities. I applaud the broad-ranging programs that you have announced. I really was very touched by the emotional connection that you have to this problem, and that you appreciate that solving the issue requires addressing many dimensions to the problem, supporting the victims and enhancing victim services, strengthening law enforcement, and also bringing data and research to bear to inform our policy choices. And I strongly support your efforts to make felony sex trafficking a crime of violence. County Executive Leggett, thank you for prioritizing the county's anti-trafficking efforts through legislation and through also an active and effective Human Trafficking Task Force. At the University of Maryland Safe Center, we see every day the traumatic effects of human trafficking on victims and their families. I'd like to share 2 stories to give you a sense of what this looks like in the state of Maryland. A 16-year-old teen, born and raised in Maryland, was trafficked by a man in his 20s who romanced her, bought her gifts, and pretended to be her boyfriend. He duped her into going with him to a hotel where she was raped by a man that he had arranged to be there. Her boyfriend was actually a pimp who sold her for sex so that he could make money to feed his drug habit. He controlled her by threatening to harm her mother. And then he got her hooked on heroin, which gave him another way to control her. In another case, a young woman was lured here with the promise of the American dream. A job, a better life, and the ability to support her young child. But instead, the job that awaited her was forced prostitution, and she was thrust into a life of fear, trauma, and cruelty. She worked 7 days a week and was forced to have sex as many as 30 times a day. And if she did not hand over $3,000 to her traffickers each week, they threatened her at knife point and they beat her brutally. To ensure that she did not try to escape, they threatened the life of her daughter, who was being held captive by the parents of the traffickers in her home country. She was trafficked up and down the East Coast along the I-95 corridor from New York to the Carolinas, with much of the trafficking occurring here in Maryland, in Montgomery County, in Prince George's County, in Baltimore, and in DC. Unfortunately, these stories are not isolated incidents, but they are patterns that we see over and over again at the Safe Center. I'm glad, Governor, that you mentioned labor trafficking, because it's often overlooked, and it's a serious crime in the United States and also in Maryland, but it is very much under-identified and under-reported. A number of the Safe Center's clients were trafficked into domestic servitude right here in Montgomery County, including in the wealthy suburb of Potomac, where they were forced to work inhumanely long hours for virtually no pay, made to sleep on the floor, were malnourished, not allowed to leave the house, and threatened with deportation if they complained. This landscape is why we established the Safe Center at the University of Maryland as a comprehensive direct services, research, and advocacy center for human trafficking survivors. We provide bilingual legal services, social services, mental health and medical care, economic empowerment programming, and crisis intervention services for both sex and labor trafficking survivors. We are so grateful to the University of Maryland for taking on this compelling human rights issue, and for the leadership and the presidents of both the University of Maryland College Park, Wallace Lowe, and University of Maryland College Park, Baltimore, Dr. Jay Furman. And I want to thank especially Marianne Rankin, who is here. In Maryland, we are fortunate to have a coordinated state, local, and federal effort so essential in the fight against human trafficking. This is ably led by the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force in coordination with Glenn Houston and the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention, and joined by the Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and other local county task forces. In the legislature in Maryland, we have a great champion in Montgomery County's Senator Susan Lee, and I thank you again. I want to echo what the governor said about your outstanding efforts. And in the Congress, our senators, Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen, have been strong proponents of anti-trafficking initiatives as well. Governor Hogan, the initiatives that you announced today will support our collective work. Thank you for your strong commitment to helping human trafficking survivors heal and reclaim their lives.